Uh, Good afternoon, all. A warm welcome to the webinar series hosted by Cybersecurity COE of Future Focus Infotech. In today's webinar, we'll be joined by Dr. Harish, who will be taking us through various topics like secure VPNs, networking commands, data security, and privacy. A quick intro about our speaker today. Dr. Harish is a seasoned cybersecurity professional with experience in various security domains. He has a PhD from Queensland University and is a visiting faculty in Trichy, Bangalore. So before I go ahead and hand over to Harish, a few points to the participants. All the participants will be put on a mute mode during the entire webinar. In case you have any questions, you could do that in a chat box to the host or the co-host. Presentation will last around 45 to 50 minutes, followed by a quick discussion and a Q&A. And a special thanks to the participants who have posted their queries during the time of registration. So with this note, I hand over to Harish. Enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all the participants to the webinar hosted by Future Focus Infotech. Thank you, Mr. Somnath, for the introduction. Very much overwhelmed to handle the second part of second series of seminar with FFI. Last time, we've handled a relative topic, and this time we are connecting with virtual private network, its checklists, the data security, the data privacy connection. It is, of course, very important and desired to say that VPNs have become so popular suddenly over a period of last couple of months' time since the lockdown has been announced. And yes, we've been using VPN quite some time. Only few important stakeholders and people who update their content online sitting from remote locations would be using the VPN before 2 months. In fact, in most of the organizations, they don't even enable VPN because they used to think that it is a threat. Of course, yes, VPN do possess some levels of threat. It can only attack. It can be initiated with attacks. People always be in fear of connecting from external network, especially when we're connecting from outside office or through a client place. We don't know what internet connection we are connecting from and how the connectivity is, if it is strong or somebody is trying to peep in and gather the data, sniffing kind of activities or eavesdropping is taking place. So we keep having a lot of questions, the client and also the employee who's trying to connect external. And of course, the network team is always on high alert when a VPN connection is enabled. Because of these kind of restrictions and limitations, it has always been restricted only to few people. But given the scenario, we are sitting at home, working from home. So the employers are forced to enable VPN to almost all the employees. In fact, when we have decided to set up the VPN connection or to buy the firewall for our organization, we wouldn't have anticipated to open up the VPN connection for all the users. And that also triggered a lot of issues in connection with bandwidth restrictions and limitations and monitoring pattern identification, data security. There are a few technical terms that are also coming into existence. And we have created few topics which will directly be connected to VPN and its data security and privacy. And of course, we've also opened a few points for discussion where Mr. Somnath will be asking me the questions, whatever that's happening at the moment. And we'll go through the slides and see how we can enumerate ourselves and identify issues that are pertaining to our computers and also to organization perspective. So we would be seeing it from both angles, from employers and also from employee. And I would be able to distinguish that separately. Of course, the thumb rule is pretty easy. When I'm asking a question, please raise your hands if you know the answer, if you have experience, something like that. At the same time, please write your questions in the chat box. Or if you wanted to speak out, you will have your time to post your questions on the time given to you. I hope that would be easy for us to have a proper interaction and question answering in a seamless manner. So the agenda for today is what is VPN, then secured VPN, VPN checks and balances, some networking commands. I wanted to really mention the word colloquial because I believe each and every employee should know these commands because we are all working from home. When you are inside your office environment, these commands may not be of great use to you because your network guys or your system administrators would be able to test these things from their seats. And a common threat that is evolving called as distributed network attack. It has been there for quite a long time. It was utilized for a different purpose, but now that has been used for malicious activities. And at the end, open for discussion on data privacy and data security, right? So with this, I'm going to the first slide. Virtual private network. This slide just to give you what is a VPN. Pretty much everybody who has joined this call is aware of what is a VPN. In a practical manner, we would be looking at it. We are having our hands on in configuring it. But why this definition is just to give a formality kind of thing. So it's a private network and that occurs through an unsecured public network. So where we don't know whom we are connecting with. We don't know how the data is transferring, how the data is going to be handled. So all these kind of problems are kept open and we would try and see how these can be addressed. And it is basically for encryption. And generally when we talk about a VPN, the basic example that I can give is two people talking over a tube and the conversation is being hearing only by the person who is supposed to hear and it's being spoken only by the person who is about to speak. People who ever touch the tube will feel that something is happening inside, but they will not be able to hear or listen or penetrate into the communication because the tube is the encryption and whatever that we are trying to communicate is happening within the encryption. That is why we call it as a tunnel. So we know that it is happening, but we don't know what is happening. So the bandwidth will be calculated, but we don't know what data is actually transferring between the sender and the receiver. So that's the utility of VPN. Henceforth, we keep saying that no, if you have a VPN connection, it's good because the sender and the receiver would be able to identify and the connection is safe. But yes, there are a lot of configuration that is required to perform such operations, right? So we need to have a hardware, you need to have software. It's a correlation between hardware and software in most of the cases. Yes, it is important to make sure that whether you are configured, you are enabled hardware enabled configuration or you have enabled software enabled configuration. It should be seamless and it should support your existing infrastructure. The two types of VPN which are commonly known, one is IPsec, another one is SSL VPN. Of course, we all know that IPsec and SSL VPN and its utility and stuff. So what is different about it and why do we have to talk about this at the moment? See, IPsec is older than SSL. IPsec is generally client-based. If any of your user wanted to connect to a VPN channel, they need to have a client installed in their device, either in their laptop or in their desktop, and they need to connect and all the communication would travel through that VPN connection. So that's why IPsec is client-based. On the contradictory, SSL is browser-based. So you need to open your browser, enter your username and password that is given to the user, and connect from anywhere you want. You don't need a client. Today you're connecting using your mobile phone. Tomorrow you're connecting using a desktop. Day after tomorrow you're trying to connect using a laptop. Again, you may try to come back to your remote mobile devices. So it's upon your own convenience, and SSL is pretty open for convenience matter. At the same time, anybody can connect to your SSL if they know the username and password. Of course, that is also possible with IPsec if they know the client username and password and they can install the client. In one case, IPsec can be recorded where if the employee is using the organization laptop, then the MAC address and the IP address can be binded, and you can continue to monitor whether that person is only connecting to that device. In SSL, that is not possible, so you need to be very conscious when you're connecting. So that's where we call it as a disadvantage in connecting IPsec and SSL. IPsec is older and SSL is new. So it's both of them are have got a difference of about 5 years between their utility in real time and in application utility. Since I've not wanted to handle a VPN class here, and I wanted to be very short and sweet, of course, I'm open for questions in connection with that. So please shoot your questions. I'm happy to take it up and support in that case. Then the important point with respect to VPN checks and balances, yeah, this slide is pretty much for employers in this case, where employees may not be directly knowing the configuration setup. So first point is choose the right VPN with encryption supported by the device. So it is always better to use the known VPNs. There are a lot of VPNs, in fact, for gathering information for this webinar. I found a lot of VPNs in the market where I've not even come across those names, or I don't even have references to those. Even I'm a pretty efficient dark web player for the last about 9.5 years. Some of the VPNs which I even find it in the dark web is all being found in the the web that we are trying to access. So I don't know how efficient it would be, how safe it would be. So please use VPNs that are from legitimate vendors, and don't go for VPNs which are cheap and if you're not aware of the VPN. So that's a suggestion which I definitely wanted to give. That is one of the checks and balances you need to be confident about it. In order to save money, don't fall into a pit. Then the second point is better to use VPN configuration within firewall. So as I mentioned during the start of this webinar, we wouldn't have anticipated opening up the VPN connection for all the users, but it is now inevitable that we need to open up connection to all the user, whoever is connecting from their home for their work purpose. And in such time, it is important that your firewall may not support so much of connectivity. So it is better to upgrade your firewall or buy another firewall pretty fast as soon as possible. Now, the last few days time, I was able to understand from the emails that I'm receiving that vendors have started providing the hardware devices. So please make use of it, at least if you have not given a thought in the last 1.5 to 2 months time. So it is better to connect using a firewall, because your configuration can be looked upon. And when you're buying your firewall, make sure that you have the anti-spam, anti-malware, IDS, IPS, everything enabled with the latest signatures possible. Because your VPN connection would have to be tested in both ways, on incoming and of course in connection with outgoing data transfer. So be confident about it. The third point is check the host before connecting to corporate network. This is a little tricky step in case, because you don't know who is actually connecting to your network. The employer assume that only your employees are connecting, and you also assume that your employees have their systems uninfected. In fact, I would like to give a small story on this. Of course, this will happen, but it is a story. It has not happened, or it has not recorded yet, where I have not come across. I'm pretty sure a lot of us have kids at home, and our kids have opening our laptops and browsing, playing games, kind of things. Yes, we don't have an option apart from giving the laptops to our kids if they are at the age between 8 to 12, 13, or probably a little more than that. So it is important that we don't allow those, our kids to download any application, or when they wanted to install or they wanted to play a browser-based game. Just be sure to check whether they are downloading anything, or they are downloading any themes in connection with browser plugins or browser extension, because most of the vulnerability that comes into your system the best way is by gaming applications. So be conscious when you do it, and before you connect to your corporate network, please test it. And at the same time, of course, the employer will not be able to check in a random. They will not be able to check in every computer. It will most likely in a randomized manner. But please enforce the item in your checklist. Probably you can shoot an email to all your employees asking to scan your at least your C drive activities to check whether they're safe enough. That's what the next step says. Scan the host before initiating traffic using VPN. So support this mechanism. It should be both employees and employer. It should be a teamwork in order to avoid any disruption to your personal network and also to your corporate network. The last point is enable automatic kill switch in VPN during disconnection to avoid spilling of data. I would like to talk about a case study which I've handled about 6-7 months before in the Middle East area. There is a company where they enabled site to client VPN. So they have site A, which is the headquarters. They have site B, and they also have clients who connect to site B. So this company has monitored, and they have got basic principles, of course, and they've got policies and procedures developed. So they enabled a site-to-site VPN, and that site VPN has been extended to a client. So we call them site-to-site to client VPN. It's possible today. And one unfortunate day, there was an attack initiated from the client side, and that attack was able to enter into the site A, which is the headquarters. By means of the site B, it has entered into headquarters, and problems started triggering. Okay. When immediately the company has identified that there is a problem, so they disrupted the site-to-site VPN connectivity, and they wanted to do a basic audit, and they try to put forth their time to understand by means of the logs, and they called forensic investigators. They did whatever that is required to be done in the next couple of days' time. They identified a MAC address, of course, and they said this MAC address must be the reason for the malicious code injection. So please be cautious and blacklist this MAC address in this site, which is a site A, which is the headquarters. After a week's time, they enabled the site-to-site VPN with more controls, the more monitoring scenario. And they also enabled the site-to-site to client VPN as well. That client has got the MAC address, and the MAC address got connected again to site B, and it in turn reflected to site A. So in this case, the company and the third party becomes so curious. How come a blacklisted MAC address can enter into the system again and accessing the data? So they become so spurious, and they wanted to check. Then by means of understanding, they started probing site B and asking them who is this MAC address, because it is now coming through your VPN. Then they figured out this is our client's MAC address. See, when they performed the activity of forensic investigation and log analysis, they completely forget about this, that they have a site-to-site to client connection that is enabled. Though they had documentation, right? Documentation is not the only solution. Though they had the documentation, the main problem that happened was the site-to-site to client VPN got disconnected. Okay. And during the disconnection, the communication was still on. They were not aware that the VPN was disconnected. The VPN connector, concentrator, which was supposed to connect, has disconnected the connection, but the connection was continuous. So somebody was looking at that connection, and they tried to inject a malware into the system. So in such scenarios, it is always important that you enable the automatic kill switch that comes with every VPN. Remember, it is not an easy option. You need to go and search for the automatic kill switch. According to the VPN configuration, it keeps changing, but every VPN will have that switch. If you are going to enable that, obviously you will be able to avoid the spilling of data. Maybe confidential, it may be non-confidential, it doesn't matter, but data is very important according to any organization. So please never missed to enable your kill switch. After that, I started reading more information about the kill switch. I figured out more than 85% of organization, whoever has enabled VPN, do not enable the kill switch. So please check it out and enable it. It is not going to disrupt your bandwidth. It is not going to disrupt any of your other activities. It is just going to monitor the seamless connectivity. And if it is not seamless, then automatically the kill switch will be enabled and your connection will be abruptly disconnected. So that's a best way of doing it. Remember that when there is a problem in your network, the best solution is to pull the cable out. That's where the common sense perspective come into cybersecurity. And kill switch is something which is very similar to the common sense perspective. Data in rest, data in motion, or data in transit. So both are very important terminology in connection with the previous case study which I have explained. So they had a lot of data in rest. So data in rest can be inactive, or it is the data, or we can even call it as an information processed data stored in digital form. It can be in a backup drive. It can be in an external hard drive. It can be in a particular operating system installed computer. It can be in a thumb drive. We don't know where the data can be stored. Okay, it is not advisable to store it, but yes, for cautious reason, for immediate retrieval purpose, organizations have got a policy to store it in external drive and keep the drive in a safe place with encryption enabled in it. So that's the best practice. And the data in transit, moving data anywhere. Now, if you are enabled a VPN connection, then your organization is transferring the data for access for your employees who are working from home in that connection. So VPN kill switch is one of the defense in depth option. And the only solution for you to monitor the complete segment of data would be your defense in depth. So understand your defense in depth starting from your gateway firewall, and then you connect your honeypots, DMZs. If you have sandboxing, enable that. Then you need to have your secondary firewall in cases where there will also be a secondary honeypot. Honeypot is not an expensive solution. In fact, your old server can be used as a honeypot as well. And moving forward, where you wanted to store the data, have your ADs, Active Directories, and your connectivity to be checked, encryption to be enabled. So there are a lot of defense in depth that you can enable. Starts from physical security and goes until data security. They've got about 6 to 7 layers of security according to the verticals of the organization. It keeps changing. So don't follow a defense in depth that has been followed in another organization. Please take it as an example and define your own. It is not where you need to learn a lot of things. It's just segments, and you can follow it in a seamless manner. So data security, when you talk about data in rest and data in transit, defense in depth would be a very optimum solution, and also the first in the list solution to understand. Then comes the demo part of the discussion. So I would have probably about another 10 to 15 minutes of demo. So please take a note of it. Of course, all the commands for this demo are mentioned in the presentation. This presentation is going to be available for you as well after the session. So moving forward to those commands, I wanted you guys to understand these commands, because this command is for home users, pretty much for people whoever is connected from working from home to their organization network. So I mentioned in the previous slide that employers need to configure the VPN in a strong manner. Right now, I'm supporting the employees, the users who are trying to connect to the organization network, corporate network, using the VPN connection to check whether you are on the right track, whether somebody is trying to install an application, somebody is trying to run a process, somebody is trying to connect to your router. So there are a lot of questions that keeps coming in. In fact, the previous webinar we did show a couple of steps about the router configuration. So this time I wanted to extend it to the next level and to make you guys understand some basic commands. And of course, some of the commands are little more interesting when it comes to network security, but it's not difficult, and it is not going to spoil or modify or edit any of the options or settings that are already available in your system. So you can use these commands with no problems. Of course, you need to have administrator access when you're going to run some of the commands, because it's not going to provide you the outcome. And let me share my whole computer so that you will all be able to view my screen as well. Let me open the command prompt. I hope everybody knows how to open a command prompt. So I would want you guys to open your command prompt if you wanted to try these commands immediately, so that you would have everything shared. Right. So I hope you're all able to see my command prompt. I know the font is pretty small. I would use probably a magnifier to help you guys to view it. I'm opening my magnifier as well simultaneously. So I am using my wife's computer, because my computer has got other things, so I would not be able to use that to test these things. And you can see that username as Geeta Harish. So you would have to finally find out this username. If you're able to find this username, then you're able to log into your command prompt and do the basic command testing. Okay. So the first command that I wanted you guys to test would be just type system info, right? Nothing else. It's just system info. It will give you the information about the processor information, the network information, your configuration, what is the operating system that you have installed, your host name, and your connectivity things. What are all the hot fixes installed by Windows Update? Then what are all the network interface card, NIC, drivers being installed? So I use a Realtek, I use an Intel dual band wireless, and it comes with an AC standard. Then we have a Hyper-V requirement. I have VM monitor mode extensions. I have installed VMware here. Then I've got virtualization enabled in firmware, which says no. Then I have secondary level address transition and translation and data execution prevention available. So whatever you have enabled in connection with your system's core drivers, you would be able to see all the commands here pretty easily. And I'm pretty sure this would be of help to all of you to gather the maximum information about your computer, like what is the total physical memory, available memory, virtual memory, kind of things. So I'll tell you why you need to take note of this memory information. See, right now I'm using very less applications in my system, and of course Windows operating system do take more than 2 gig of your memory utility. So I have about a virtual memory of about 11 gig, and virtual memory available is about 6 gig, and the virtual memory in use is about 4 gig approximately. So in connection with that, if you can note these data out and store it somewhere, it can even be in a notepad file. When you are encountering a problem, you will be able to compare these data and check whether your computer without a problem and computer with problem. So you would be able to see that, yes, something is running in my computer, I don't know what is it. So you would start to do more investigation into your computer to understand the utility of your memory. Why I'm telling this is something which I wanted to take it to the distributed denial attack, distributed DDoS attack setup. So once I'm explaining that, you will be able to correlate this example there, this demo there. Okay. So please make the information useful for you. It will definitely be of help to you. So that is command number 1, just system info, no space in between, all lowercase characters, right? Let me go to the second command. This, most of you might be knowing it. It is ipconfig /all. So this will show you all the internet protocol configuration connected to your laptop. And you can see the desktop name again, host name. It was prescribed in the previous one also when you type the system info. So you can check with multiple faces whether it is right or not. Then you have media disconnected. I don't have the Ethernet adapter because I've not connected it. That is where the Realtek PCI GB family controller comes in. Then I have adapter Ethernet, another Ethernet, which is VMware's adapter, which I use it for endpoint VPN client. I have disconnected that at the moment. Then I have a LAN where when I connect that Realtek, this will show as connected as well. Again, I have got another because that is where my virtual adapters, again, I have got 2 virtual adapters installed. Most of you may have 3, 4, some may have only 1. So don't get annoyed if you're not able to see more than 1, or somebody is saying 3 or 4. Don't worry, you might have tried to install something and that would have enabled a virtual adapter. But if you are not going to use it, it is not going to populate in the list. Then comes the Intel dual band wireless AC 3160. So I'm using an AC standard configuration at the moment. So the Wi-Fi device that is connected to my laptop has got that facility. And my information, the IPv4, V6 information, all are enabled. My DNS servers, everything is available there. This would give you an understanding of what is your IP address and what is your subnet mask. Of course, you can identify it just by typing ipconfig, but ipconfig /all would give you the complete connectivity, network connectivity of your laptop. Just for basic info, many of you may know it. And as I told you, the first few commands are only for a reference purpose, the first 5. The third command which I wanted to show you is the get MAC command, which will give you the MAC address of your device. Of course, all the commands that I have mentioned is only for Windows operating system. So you can see that media disconnected, and then I have a device that is connected here, right? So it says that you can just remember this number 82, okay, DB82. It says device TCP IP connected because I am using internet connectivity using this MAC address. You may ask, what are all the remaining 2 MAC addresses? The first MAC address may be my MAC address, that may be my Ethernet card address. The second may be my Bluetooth. So I have both Bluetooth, my Ethernet, and my Wi-Fi. So if I have 3 networking devices, each networking device will have a physical address, which is the MAC address here, right? So let me check MAC address of DB82. Can you see that MAC address of DB82? 34E6AD56DB82. Intel dual band wireless. So I've connected my laptop with wireless connectivity. Henceforth, this MAC address shows device TCP IP. Let's go to ADDF, right? Last 2 digits. ADDF, can you see that here? I told you, right? That is my Realtek PCIe, which is my Ethernet card that is connected. Now I know what is the third one. That is nothing but my Bluetooth connectivity. So you need to check how many MAC addresses that are enabled, how many MAC addresses are connected, right? This would help you to understand whether your computer is connected to the device and the connectivity that is available, the radio frequency that you have provided. 3 commands are over. The next one is even more easy command called ping. Many of us do check this command for testing our connectivity, but this ping command, we're going to use it for the next level of understanding, okay? So ping -t space, ping space -t space, any URL that you would like to go ahead with. So everybody goes with Google, so let me also try the same. Trying with ping space -t space google.com, enter. And the -t means this command would continuously hit until you stop automatically, okay? Generally, when you type a ping command, ping space the IP address or the URL, the output is generally only for 4 hops, right? But when you type -t, it is for ping to death until your computer stops working, until the device stop responding. This ping command will keep running. You can see that it's running continuously. I've not stopped it. You may ask how to stop it. Please press Ctrl+C to stop this command. So I have allowed the ping to work on for 41 packets, and 41 packets received, and loss is 0. This is something which is common info. But why did I type this command so many times? You can see the time, right? The time as 5 milliseconds and 7 milliseconds. That's the only difference that I'm able to identify. And the time to live, TTL, is 56. You can see it is continuously, it is 56 all across. So you may ask this question, now why do I have to take control of this? If your router is not working properly, if your router's antenna is not working properly, or if somebody has penetrated into your router and trying to suck the data out, then there will be a huge variation. For example, your variation will be like 5 ms, then the second variation will be 2132 ms, the third one will be 230 ms, the fourth one would be 8 ms, the fifth one would be 7000 ms. So it keeps changing. If that kind of an erratic behavior is being identified, if you have a spike, if you have a graph kind of a scenario, it would show you a different spike altogether, like the ECG monitor that we look at it. If you encounter such activity, then definitely there is some problem either with your router or with your router antenna, or somebody is trying to connect to your router, or you have a television that is connected to your router and somebody is watching YouTube using that, and that may disrupt your connectivity. So there are a lot of ways that you can identify that whether your router is responding properly or not. So these are all easy commands that we don't need to have administrative privileges to type these commands and to test it, right? 4 of them are done. We're going to the 5th one. Okay. The 5th command is called as netstat, N-E-T-S-T-A-T. Netstat means network statistics. So netstat is a very important command when you talk about it. So let me try that N-E-T-S-T-A-T space -an. So you can ask me why not only netstat. In netstat would start to populate 1, 2, 3, 4. -an is something which it populates pretty faster. So I've typed enter. You can see that my system is responding in all these port numbers available. 135, 445, 5040, 7680, and lot many ports. Then it says close wait, which means I was accessing this device previously. The cache memory is loaded somewhere. I have not released the cache memory. So it is showing that close_wait. It says established, which means I have kept my system browser opened with these website URLs. So you can check what URL you have opened. If your browser plugin or your browser extension is automatically connecting to some IP address, and if you wanted to test what are all those IP address, then you can type this netstat space -an command, take a complete list of this IP address, try and go and test what IP address it is and where it is belong to. If you are trying, if you have closed all the tabs that you have kept opened in your browser, and you also opened all the browser windows, now you only have your internet connection enabled, and then you type this same command, it will say that only listening ports, or it will only say established ports. If your cache memory is flushed, then you will not be able to see this close_wait commands. So this would give you an understanding of what are all the IP addresses that are being accessed by your individual computer. You can also test whether if you have VPN connected, you can test whether your VPN is connected and it is established. So this is again a very easy command which would help you to understand. You can see the port numbers listed here, right? So these are all the open IP address where I have kept it open, internal IP where I have connected VMware. So I have configured that with 127 and I've configured that with different port numbers in this system. So that's the main reason where it says TCP and UDP connection. Ease of access would definitely help you in identifying problems. You may think that how can I identify the problems without an antivirus program? These are all the methods. So we've seen the basic commands, the first 5 of them. So the last 5, okay, are the commands which are which may require terminal access. I mean, in such case, you may need your administrative access for you. So I would want to explain that in that case, because most of you are using your organization system. So I would take this to only explain. I don't want it to show it because it may take more time to populate, except for one command in the list. Okay. So let me, close this command window and open my command in administrative mode. You may see the difference. I'm keeping it, say it says C users Geeta Harish, and then I have typed this command, right? Now I'm going to the command prompt. Okay. And I'm going to open the command prompt in administrative with administrative privileges, right? So I right click on the command prompt icon and run as administrator. Right, now I'm going to share the other screen for you guys so that you will be able to identify the difference between a user and an administrator. Okay. Now, can you all see this? It says very clearly that system Windows and system 32, which means it is running as an administrator. Now I'm just going to type only one command here. The remaining commands I wanted you to see the presentation and probably take a note of it. Of course, the presentation is also going to be available online where you can keep trying it out. And I would anyway going to explain that you can find those commands online. Nothing is hidden here. So I'm going to type a command called net sh. Okay. So this is a command that is generally being used to identify your network shell, net sh. Okay. Which will give you the complete information of your connected drivers or connected connectivity, connected connectivity, right? So net sh, and the command, if you just type enter, it just opens up net sh, and whatever I wanted to type, I can type. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to net sh and type the whole command. Okay, WLAN, which means my wireless LAN, because I'm connected only using my wireless LAN at the moment, right? I wanted to show what is my profile name. Okay, my profile name, and of course I also wanted to see what is my password of the profile name. Okay, profile space name equal to, I wanted to type that SSID that I have connected with. I have connected with an SSID called THAKKU space 2.4 gigahertz. Okay, so that's exactly what I wanted to do here. Then I wanted to know what is the password. So I wanted to type the key, and I wanted it in clear text. Clear text means non-encrypted text. Press the key, enter. I got it populated. So my SSID, I've got only one SSID there. So which is TAKU 2.4 GHz. Network type is infrastructure. Radio type. What encryption authentication that I have enabled WPA2 personal. Of course, I've also enabled the encryption method as TKIP and AES. My wireless password is wireless ***. Okay, I have remodified it for today's class, right? Then what is the cost? There is no cost, there is no restriction kind of things. You can see the password of my connectivity. So if you wanted to connect, if you wanted to check, if you wanted to understand whether you are connected with a non-rogue access point, then you may have to type this and check whether you are connected to your own access point. There is always an opportunity for your neighbors who is a student or who is trying to learn networking or security. They wanted to just create a rogue access point just to test. If you are doing your office work and you're trying to connect to your office network, it is always better to type this command to check whether you are connected to your own router with the password. Somebody can create a rogue access point with TAKU 2.4 gigahertz. It's always possible. So we will keep that open in that case, right? I hope this gives an understanding for all of you. Now I'm going back to the presentation slide to give you the explanation for the other commands. So the next command is the for, it starts with for and then it has a huge list. This is just to test how many IP addresses are connected, and the outcome would be stored in C drive. You can copy this command and paste it in your command prompt. Of course, you need to have administrator access for it. Then there are 3 more commands. One is Cypher, other one is Power CFG, and the third one is task list. Cypher is a command that is used for flushing all the deleted item out from your computer, which will show you the real available storage information, the empty space information. Power CFG space /energy will give you the power information and the utility information in your laptop. Of course, task list will show you what are all the tasks that are right now running. And in connection with that, hidden tasks that are not listed in Windows Task Manager can also be viewed. So if there is any malicious activity that is running on your system, this would definitely be of help to you. I hope the colloquial, networking commands is of help to all home users and all the system users as well. The next thing is distributed network attack. I would like to take it a little faster because it's a connectivity based attack where unused computing capacity is being used for initiating a distributed network attack. Generally, distributed network attack was introduced to recover passwords where we lost the passwords. So we use multiple systems, unused capacity, CPU utilization and memory to try the password with multiple combinations in a faster manner. But now that is now being used for server and client level, where injecting a malicious spyware into systems and trying to use the system's unused CPU capacity bandwidth, of course with the memory as well, and initiate a DDoS attack. So your client would be running behind, so you will not be able to view it in most of the cases. The previous commands which I have shown you would help you to identify whether your system is being used for distributed network attack. So this is exactly the diagrammatic representation of a DDoS attack. You will have a controller, then you have a handler, then you have attack bots, and then you attack a target. Now there are only 6 systems being showed here, but generally there are thousands of systems that are connected together to initiate an attack. And distributed network attack is one of the prominent modes of enabling a DDoS attack, so that the IP addresses cannot be identified. And even if you identify, there'll be more than thousands of systems. You will not know which system is the real culprit. So identifying problems will become more tough. Now the last slide, we are coming to the self-audit checklist. So it says follow VPN checks and balances I've mentioned before. Please check computer utilization often. I've given you the commands for that. Then know the installed programs in your computer. Please be aware about the extensions in the browsers when you're using SSL VPN. And of course, based on client VPN, only download the client VPN from the original website, from the company's vendor website. And of course, know basic commands to check status quo of your connection and your computer. So with this, I would conclude my webinar in connection with presentation. Now we have a few minutes time where we have some discussion on data privacy and data security. Over to Mr. Somnath for next level of discussions.
Thank you, Harish. That was really exhaustive in nature.
Thank you.
In fact, with respect to the data in motion or data in rest and the other data privacy thing which we saw in the earlier slides, maybe you'd like to take some views from you in terms of data privacy.
Please, yeah.
In today's scenario, if you could see, data privacy and data security are most, interchangeably used jargons today.
Correct.
Of course, for sure, both are different. One, the privacy, focuses more on what could be collected, what are the permissible uses.
Correct.
And the data security focuses more on the PII triad. So, what could be your views on this, or what could be your simple explanation on this for the benefit of participants?
Great. What you mentioned is definitely right. It has always been interchanged. In fact, people often use the word data security first, but remember, data privacy is first, then data security. You should use the jargon first as privacy and then security, because without gathering of data, without collection of data, without data retention and without data storage, data security is nothing. Once you have the data, then it makes sense. But it is important that you need to follow the privacy laws when gathering the information. And that is where the data privacy comes in, where you follow the process of gathering the information and collecting the information, of course, storing, retention, whenever you wanted to use it. Then comes data security. The moment when you start to store it, that's where you start to discuss about policies, you start to discuss about the means of personal data. Then you categorize whether it is corporate data, personal data, the methods of utility. So you start to think of process, then you start to think of the policies, the procedures, then you bring in the standards, then the protocols. So in data security, policies and other things will come in. In data privacy, it's proper usage, access, retention, and collection. So that's how you should start using these terms and diversify the terms into different ways. So that's what explanations also says in different books, and research articles and journals do discuss this again and again, but still, we have the habit of interchanging the terms. So I feel this would give an insight on the terminologies.
Yes, that was very crisp. In fact, when we talk about unprotected data, whether it could be data in transit or data at rest, it leaves enterprises vulnerable to attacks.
Yes.
One of the most effective data protection for both these could be data encryption, right?
Correct. Very correct. Very correct. Yeah.
So apart from this data encryption, do we have any other ways in which we could take care of data?
At the moment, in the market, data encryption is the only direct solution. There is definitely no other solution available. So when you're following it up, yes, there are a lot of best practices being provided. Okay. And one of the best practices that we always wanted is when you commence the utility of the data, you know that there is a VPN, you are enabling it. When you're gathering the data on the other end, you know that it is coming around and then it is stored in encryption. So we just have to be confident enough to check that the data is seamless all across with the encryption applied. So that's the only way. Encryption is the solution, but of course, you need to have an encryption which is seamless, continuous.
Right, great. So when you talk about best practices for data protection, some organizations would insist on implementing robust network security controls. That would help, help data in transit to be pretty safe. Of course, network security solutions like firewalls and network access control would also help secure the networks. So what could be your views on this?
You're talking about the best practices for data protection, right?
Right.
So pretty much I have defined it in two ways. One is the compliance perspective. Probably you can say it is compliance not belonging to any law or anything, but it is a connectivity things where prevention, where needed policies and procedures. Then you talk about control, where how the data is going to be stopped, sharing of data by devices and kind of things. Then is extension. So how you're going to keep the data stored, and when you're going to access the data, how it is going to be accessed. And when you're transferring the data, as I told you, encryption is very important. With data protection, the basic three things are prevention, control, and extension. When it is stored, it's safe, according to you. But when you're moving it, where are you moving it? What is the reason for moving? So that's where the best practice is coming in. That's point number one when it comes to practice. Number two is always the technical perspective. People keeps asking, we know that there are a lot of policies and procedures are all there, but we really don't know how to incorporate it in technicality. There are again three important things. One is data encryption. Again, we know that. I'm not including that into the three. The data loss and prevention, DLP practices and solution, then data breach plan, and follow the practices that are already there according to your regional or your client-based compliance methodology. So it should be segregated into two. I believe this would give them an idea of how to distinguish between the technical and the non-technical aspect.
Great, that was very clear. Before we move to the Q&A, I would like to launch a quick poll. So request the participants to spare a minute and answer the poll before we take the Q&A and then conclude the session.
Sure.
Yeah. Right then. Thanks. We are keeping getting responses from the audiences. So just quickly moving to the Q&A. We had a couple of participants. The first question is from Sampath Kumar, who is asking, how do we prevent users to upload or download files from the customer server?
Can you please repeat the question once again? I think I missed the connectivity, if I'm right.
Right. So how to prevent a user from downloading or uploading files from the customer server?
Okay. See that the only way is to monitor the activity, because most of the developers do have access to upload the content into the client server because it's in the cloud environment, and
right.
There is no direct way to just to stop them to download anything, because I know they're working from home. They have the right to, or they have the option to download it, and they can store the source code kind of things. So the only way is to monitor their downloading, whatever data that they're downloading, whatever data that they are trying to access. And certain organizations, do it only from one particular source, so it can be avoided. But in real term, with my experience, I don't think we have a direct answer for this. It's only through a process. That's it.
Okay, great then. The next question is from Amudavalli, and there are a lot of apps which keeps coming up without any security. So do we have solutions for that?
The only way is to keep your device secured. You cannot trust every application, unfortunately, especially in the Play Store. It's very difficult. Whenever you are about to download an application, please read about the application. Just take about 5-6 minutes. Just type the application name and a vulnerability or attack. Then obviously all the list pertain to that application would be identified, and that is the only way. Of course, you can have your system or your device secured with installing an antivirus program. So that's though. I mean, I can only provide you 2 ways. That's just striking my mind, and I think those are the ways.
Okay. So we take 2 more questions before we close the webinar.
Sure.
The next question would be, which method is easy to set up? Is it an SSL or an IPsec VPN?
Oh, both of them are pretty easy. There is no difference in setting up those things. In fact, it's just enabling an option that is available in VPN. So there is no difference in setting it up at all. It is only to identify. You can set up both as well. A lot of VPN concentrators today and also firewalls do provide enabling both the services. So it's according to the user's convenience and their employer's accessibility. That's it.
Okay. There is another question from Sujesh, which asks about many SMBs use aggressive mode for IPsec tunnel as it is simple. So what's your advice on this?
Pretty good, definitely, because as I mentioned, IPsec do require a client to be installed in every device. So you would be able to monitor the client with even more ease than SSL. So as I said, SSL is browser based. So there is nothing wrong in supporting IPsec, and there is also no wrong in using SSL as well. So it's according to the organization's policy, and of course the experience matters in that case. Some might say that no, our data is even more secure, so we wanted only our organization laptop to be accessed to it. So according to their policies, it keeps changing.
Okay. And one last question is, how do we address the VPNs bypassing the firewalls? Do we have any workaround solutions?
Realistically, I keep finding data relatively in connection with that, but it's always been very difficult. We know OpenVPN and SSTP, the secure socket tunneling protocol, are commonly being used, and it's always possible. The only thing which I can say is bypassing a firewall by VPN is always possible. So it's a question where probably there are a lot of questions where only the inventor can only answer. Unfortunately, I'm not an inventor at the moment, so we probably have to wait for an inventor to answer a question in connection with that, according to me. But yeah, it's not as easy as we think. A VPN can bypass a firewall. Yes, possible.
Pretty interesting stuff. Probably in some other time there could be a solution coming for that as well.
Definitely. We never anticipated that WinRAR would be a vulnerable application after 19 years, right?
Right.
Then I identified Heartbleed in 2012 with OpenSSL after many years of utility. So similarly, some or the other problems keep coming in, or we might have missed that problem, and the solutions will keep coming in. I'm very confident because in the last 5-6 years, I was able to understand a lot of old school malwares have made a comeback. Typical example is we used to buy the locks, right? The physical locks, where we said, no, it can be opened with a pin, right? But we said, no, computerized locks are more sufficient, and it is more better. You cannot break it with a pin kind of things. But it is even more easier. You can use a couple of batteries to short circuit the computer based locks. So it's not so difficult at all. So you need to again go back to the old technique. And of course, when we go back to the old technique, the old school malwares are also trying to come back. In computers, it is also happening. It's a cycle. We just have to be confident and be cautious about handling it. I keep mentioning the word caution, keeping your eyes open. That's it.
We see a lot of questions still popping up. One last question before we officially close this.
Okay.
Do we need some antivirus for Android mobiles in the view of current cyber attacks?
Definitely yes. I don't say no at all in this case, because a lot of things that we definitely miss, because it's a very small device. Mobiles are, and in most of the cases, we only use it. We also allow our kids to use it, or we gave it to our partners, better halves. So we don't know what they're doing it. So always definitely better to have an antivirus installed with valid subscription. No, not even a second thought to it.
All right. Fine, great. That was really explanative. And with that, now we have reached the end of the webinar today.
Yeah.
We have covered a lot of ground in a very short span, in fact, technical grounds. So trust you all enjoyed this session. We have more to come in the upcoming webinars. Please do keep an eye. Thank you, everyone, and have an indoor weekend.
Thank you, Mrs. Somnath. Have a good day. Thank you, participants.
Thank you.